Okay guys, welcome back. Dr. H here for Octo Beard Media, and today I'm going to show you how to build this simple collection game. Oh, it's a horrible sound. Oh, I hate it. Oh, what am I doing? Ah! So in order to make this simple collection game, as you can see, I've created a plane here. I've put its position to 0, 0, 0, just so it's easy to find, and I'm going to scale it up so it's about 15 meters by 15 meters, which gives me enough of a board to kind of run around on. The next thing I'm going to want to do is bring in a first-person controller here, and as always, frame in on them just to make sure their butt's not sticking out underneath, which it will be. There we go. If you're not sure how to do any of this stuff, do check out the earlier tutorials, please. So this is going to be a collecting game that we're going to make. So this session is going to be fairly script heavy. I'm going to show you how to do a few things. I'm going to show you how to use a collection script to pick something up. I'm going to show you how to use a GM script to control all of the game mechanics, including things like score, winning, timers, and then finally I'm going to show you how to do something a little bit creepier and slightly cooler with the collection scripts. So let's imagine that we are going to have a simple collection game and that our character is going to run around and collect spheres. Going to collect spheres like this. I'm going to make them a little bit smaller, kind of make them sort of 0.8, 0.8, 0.8, just so they're a little bit smaller in the screen. Just quickly make sure that my character can see this when he drops into the game. Check the game view. There we go. That's always what your character can see. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to work with this collection sphere here. I think what I'll probably do is just quickly drop this blue glow on it, just so it does kind of glow a slightly different color than my background. So now I've got this object that looks slightly different here. What I need to control it is I need a script. So this is building on the basic scripts that we did in an earlier session. This script is going to be called collection. Oh, I misspelled it. Never mind, I'll just go with it. So inside this collection script, I really need to think now about what I want the script to do. So let's take a quick look. What I want it to do is I want it to pick up and collect this object. As we saw in an earlier tutorial, it doesn't so much collect it as kind of destroy it. What we need to do is make sure that when it destroys it, it stores the information that I've picked up one. It doesn't just destroy it and forget the whole thing. The first thing I need to do is I need to edit the collider here. And I need to make the collider a little bit bigger than the object so that when the player makes contact with the trigger, the collider here, it triggers some kind of action. In order for that to work, the collider needs to be a trigger like that. So now I'm inside MonoDevelop, I can create a function. Functions tell the game engine what it should do. So this particular function is function on trigger enter, which I could spell, on trigger enter. And again, write it exactly as I've written it with the curly brackets here and here. Everything inside these curly brackets is part of this function. So the idea is when the player goes in to the trigger, when they enter the trigger, something's going to happen. So at the moment, as we remember from last time round, we're just going to destroy the game object. And that's going to take whatever game object has got this script attached to it, it's going to take that and it's going to remove it from the game. Let's save the script and go and test it. So walk up to the object, walk over it, and it's disappeared. You can see the object is nowhere in my scene. That's a successful test. Okay, so far so good. Now, we need to keep track of how many of these objects we've picked up. I don't think we should do it in this script, because the problem with this script is on the game object. And as soon as we enter the trigger, it destroys the game object. So in order for this to work, we're going to need to create another script. And this script is possibly the most important script in any game engine. This is the game's master script. So I'm going to create a new JavaScript, and the default for this is _GM. You put the underscore because it immediately shifts it to the top and front of your row here. So the GM script is going to control all of the in-game actions. As with every other type of script in Unity, you have to attach the GM script to something, a game object in the game world, in order for it to work. You should always attach the GM script to something that will never ever be destroyed as long as the player is playing. So I'm going to attach it to the player, the FPS controller. If I come down here and drag my script down to here, and there you can see it with my GM script. So I'm going to open up my GM script. My GM script is going to keep score. So for now I'm going to delete all this stuff, and I'm going to talk about something called variables. So we've worked with variables before. Variable is not actually the most helpful name for this thing. Really, it's a container, but it's a container that only holds one particular type of information. So imagine you want to ship something overseas. You've got a crate full of your meat. You've got a different crate full of your fish. You've got a different crate full of your vegetables. You're not going to mix the meat with the fish because then you're going to get fishy meat. You're not going to mix the vegetables with the fish because then the vegetables are going to rot all over the place. You're not going to mix these things. With a game engine, the sorts of information you can store is way more complex than just foodstuffs. So, in order to create a variable in JavaScript, you simply write var. You can name the variable anything you like. We'll get back to that in a second. You then have to declare what type of variable it's going to be, and that determines what sort of information this variable, this container, will hold. Today we're going to work with 3 different types of variable. So we're going to work with something called a float, which is essentially numbers with decimals. So that can include numbers that don't have decimals as well, but it's numbers with decimals. So if you want to change the speed of something to 1.5, you'd have to use a float. You couldn't use the other number, which is an integer, because integers are whole numbers only. And both floats and integers have plus and minus. You can do plus and minus in either. The final variable we're going to look at today is a Boolean. So Boolean statements are true or false. So for example, if you had a light switch, the light could be either on or off. So you might call the variable light on. And if the variable light on of type Boolean is true, then the light is on. And obviously if it's false, then the light is off. Okay, so you can't write script like this because we can't have 3 different variables in the same variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete those. I'm going to create the first variable. So this is a collection game, so we need to keep score. So I'm going to create a variable called score, and I'm going to set it of type integer. It's going to be an integer simply because we're never going to collect part of an object. We're going to collect the whole object. It's only ever going to be whole numbers. So the variable score is going to be an integer. Now I've got that, I can go back to my collection script and I can say, well, okay, when the player enters the trigger, don't just destroy the game object, add 1 to the score. And the way you would do that, and it doesn't matter which order you put this in, all of this stuff will happen simultaneously. So just because I'm writing it underneath here doesn't mean that it will happen after that. They will all happen at the same time. There is a way to slow that down. We'll get into that in a moment. So what I would write, the way to do this is I would say score equals the old score plus 1, 2, or 100, or whatever else. Now, mathematicians, don't go crazy. I know that there's not a right equation. It threw me when I first saw it. But what it means is that the new score is equal to whatever the old score was plus 1. Stick a little semicolon on the end and save it. Now, we're going to have a problem. It's a problem I came across when I first got into scripting in Unity. If I try and push play, I get an error. And if I go into console, which is next to project here, I can debug my error. Ignore this one for a second. Asset collection, unknown identifier, score. The problem is I've created the score variable in this script here, the GM. I'm just going to get rid of this one. I've created the variable score in the GM script, but I want to use it in the collection script. So there are 2 things I need to do. First of all, you can't just do that with normal variables. So the first thing I have to do is I have to make it a static variable and save that. Now that it's a static variable, it can be used by other scripts. What I need to do now is I need to tell it that this score is in a different script. And this is a little bit like typing a web address, www.google.com, for example. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, it's not score you're looking for, it's underscore gm.score, because it's in the GM script, underscore gm.score. So now it knows to go look for the score in the GM script. Okay, so we'll save that, get into Unity, and we'll test it. See if we get any errors. So, errors have gone. I'm allowed to play the game. I walk up to it, I collect it. Oh, well, I don't really know if the score's gone up or not. I mean, I haven't got any errors, apart from this one. I'll just get rid of this one. The reason I've got this is because I've got a main camera and a first-person controller, which also has a camera on it. So I'm just going to get rid of the main camera so I don't have that problem again, and then clear that error. So the issue now is I've got a score, but I can't see it. In order to fix that, I'm going to go back into my GM script, because my GM script is on my main character, and my main character, as we've just seen, has a camera. So that means they can put stuff up on the screen, and it will stay on the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a function to put stuff up on the screen. And that function is called function on GUI, on graphics user interface, graphical user interface. Function on GUI with capitals where I've put capitals like that. What this is going to allow me to do is it's going to allow me to create a GUI box in the a new one in the shape of a rectangle, and then I'm just going to pause. So inside this first set of brackets here, notice I've got brackets here, so I'm going to need a second set at the end. Inside this first set of brackets, I'm going to put some numbers. There's 4 sets of numbers. The first number, say I put 10, comma. The first number is how many units in from the side of the screen this box is going to sit. So it's going to sit 10 units in from the side of the screen. It's going to sit 10 units down from the top as well. Once I thought these were pixels, I'm not so sure they are, but whatever they are, they're very small units that sit in your screen. They may well be pixels. The third unit is 150. That's how long the box is going to be. The final unit, say 25, is how deep the box is going to be. It's going to create a GUI of the type box in the shape of a rectangle, new rectangle. It's going to create it 10 in from the side, 10 down from the top. It's going to be 150 long, it's going to be 25 deep, like so. What I can now do, because I haven't finished my statement yet, what I can now do is put some more information in there about what it's going to contain. So, put a comma, bring in the next value. I'm going to say I want it to contain the word score with that colon and a space. I'm going to put the space in there because it will put whatever I put next directly afterwards. So if I didn't put a space, it will just run the whole thing together. So inside these double speech marks here, I can type anything I want. This is a string. I can type anything I want and it will understand it. At the very end, I'm going to use the plus symbol and I'm going to add in whatever the current score is. Now I can close my bracket, put my semicolon, and that's the end of my statement. Save that, go back into Unity, and let's test it. So as you can see, I've got a variable up there that says score, and if I run into this object, score changes to 1. Fantastic. Okay, so now I've got one working. I can duplicate it into my scene. I can create another one. I can create another one. I'll just create these in a quick line. And you can see that it's going to add 1 to the score every single time I pick one up. 1, 2, 3. Great, fantastic. Problem is, I can just keep collecting these things forever and ever and ever. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do this in the GM script, is I need to think of a way of telling the player that they have won. So in order to do that, I'm going to copy this, because I'm going to do it with a GUI box. So I'm going to copy that, I'm going to put it underneath and I'm going to paste it. Now obviously I don't want this new box to be in the same space as the old box, because that's going to be a real problem. Let's give myself a bit of space so I can see what I'm doing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to think about it. This is 10 meters down from the top and then it's 25 meters deep. So if that was 35 meters, so if this was 40 meters, it should have a little 5 meter gap between the top of this box and the bottom of this box when they appear on the screen. I don't want it to just contain the score information again because that's kind of pointless. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say you win. Okay, so I've created a box that says you win. Let's go and test it. Okay, okay, so I got 1, I got 2, I got 3, and it says you win. The problem is it said you win before then. What I need to do is I need to figure out a way to tell it only display that information if I collect 3 or 5 or 10 or whatever the number is, if I collect that many objects. And the way you do that, give myself a bit more space here, is with an if clause, also sometimes called an if-then clause. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say if score is ever exactly equal to 3, close brackets, and then I'm not going to put a semicolon because this is basically one big line of text. It's one instruction. If the score is exactly equal, double equals, exactly equal to 3, then draw this box to say you've won. The convention is to put the if on the top and then the then, whatever it's controlling, underneath it, just so if someone else has to see your code, they know what does what. I'm going to save that, go back into Unity, and test it. So it doesn't say you win yet. I get 1, I get 2, I get 3, I win. Hey, fantastic. Okay. That's nice and simple and nice and straightforward. However, when I collect these things, it's a little bit flat. It's a little bit dull. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify it slightly so that they make a sound. I'll make a little bing when they're collected or something. So in order to do that, I'm going to strip it back down to just one sphere, because the best way to work in Unity is to get one perfect and then duplicate it, as we've just seen. So if I go back into my project window, you can see I've downloaded a few things here. I've downloaded this beep. It's quite an annoying beep. Let's take a listen to it. Oh gosh, right, yeah. That's the sound I'm going to use. I probably wouldn't use that in a real game, but that's the sound I'm going to use today. In order for this to work, I need to do several things. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my script, and this time I want my collection script because this is the script that's attached to the game object. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create just a couple of variables here. So the first variable I'm going to call beep, and that is of type audio clip, and that's basically the clip of sound itself. The second variable I'm going to create is something called source, and that is of type audio source. That is where the beep's going to come from. So this is the clip itself that's going to beep, and this is where it's going to come from. And obviously where it's going to come from is it needs to come from the object that I collect it. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to go back into Unity and see what's changed with the collection script. You can see it's added these two boxes here where I can drag things to it. So obviously the first thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to drag my audio clip, my beep, my horrible beep, to the beep here. I could add something else. I could add this sort of weird camera whooshing sound in, but I think that's just going to end up getting ultimately confusing. So I'm going to keep it with the beep. The second thing I need to do is I need to add an audio source. Now ordinarily what I want to do is I want to drag this down into here and put it in the box. Problem is it won't let me. And the reason it won't let me is because at the moment it doesn't know that this sphere could be an audio source. I have to give it something. I have to add a component to it. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to go to audio and I'm going to make it an audio source. As soon as I do that, I can drag this into here and it will let me because now it knows it's got the audio source component. Okay, I'm just going to show you another way to do this. I'm going to remove that component. And of course, when I do, it says missing audio source. The other way I could do it is I could drag this other beep directly down here, which then creates an audio source in the same way that we did when we did the background music in the previous session. The only thing it's important to say is you've got to decheck play on awake. And you've got to make sure that it says other beep in here, other beep in here, and that the audio source is this here. Okay, so let's save that. I'm going to call it collection. And let's go back into the script. So here's the thing. I've got an audio clip and I've got a source, like a loudspeaker almost, for it to come from. If you just take a quick look, you can now see the loudspeaker that's on there because it's an audio source. Problem is I don't have anything in the script that's telling me now is the time to play this source. So what I need to do is I need to put a little bit of information in there to do that. And what I'm going to do, and remember for the moment the order doesn't matter, is I'm going to use a little method called play one shot. So what you do is you tell it, go find the source, play one shot, and then what am I playing? I'm playing the beep, and hit the semicolon. Save that, and we'll just see if we get any errors. Okay, no errors. Let's play test. So I'm going to go up to the object, collect it. Nothing happened. Didn't make a sound. Let's dig back into the script and see if we can figure out why that is. Oh, first of all, let's check the error. It says cannot play a disabled audio source. That's a big clue. Cannot play a disabled audio source. Let's look at what we've told it to do. We've told it that when we enter the trigger, on the second we enter the trigger, actually on the first 30th of a second, we enter the trigger, destroy the game object. Oh. That's the game object that's got the source and the beep on it. So we can't use that anymore because we've just destroyed it. So what we need to do is we need to figure out a way for it to do this and this first and then do this. And unfortunately, we can't just do that because all of this stuff happens simultaneously. Now there are two systems I've found for making this work. I'm going to show you the first one first. This is the less good of the two. So what I can do is I can tell it to wait. I can tell it to yield, which for those of you in the UK, we have give way signs. In America, they have yield signs. It's the same thing. It means hold your horses, hang on, wait. And then I'm going to tell it to wait for seconds. How many seconds? Well, let's say 0.5. Okay, semicolon on that, just to finish the statement. So the idea is now that as soon as I enter the trigger, it will add 1 to the score. It will play the beep. And then it will wait for 0.5 seconds and it will destroy the game object. Let's see what that looks like in real time. Okay, here we go. Hey, and it worked. Added one to the score. Okay, the problem is, if you have a longer sound effect that you want it to play, longer than, say, half a second, then it'll just get cut off because it'll destroy the object partway through. And also, the object kind of stays on the screen just for that little flash, that little half a second after you've moved into it, which means you've either got to make the collider massive, or it's always going to look like you've not quite collected it. So I've found another way that's slightly better than this. So yes, we're still going to wait for half a second and then destroy it because we want it out of our game world. We don't want it cluttering up the space. But before we do that, what we're going to do is I'm going to tell it to transform, translate, and I'm going to tell it that I want it to go 0 meters on the x-axis. I want it to go -3 meters straight down below the floor of the game world in the y-axis, and 0 on the x-axis. And then to do that, times time dot delta delta time with capitals where I've put them. Close the brackets, semicolon. So what this is going to do now is, it's going to, on the second I go in there, it's going to add one to the score, it's going to play the beep, it's going to shoot the object 3 meters below the floor where nobody can see it instantaneously, then it's going to wait for 3 seconds, then it's going to destroy the game object. Let's save this and see what it looks like. Perfect. Collects it first time, straight away, no errors. Fantastic. Okay, so what I'm going to show you now, I'm just going to save this scene, is a slightly creepier use that we might put this same system to. So hold on to your hats. We're going to go back into Carnival. Let's frame in on the player, start the game. You can see I've already, in this scene, I've already created the thing I want. You may have heard of a fairly famous horror game franchise that has things in them called pages. So what I've done is I've just created a page here, which is basically just a cube that I've squished down flat, and I've just put some basic kind of page material on it to make it look different from the surroundings. This is going to be one of my pages. Now take a look at this, what I've done here. It's got a box collider on it, which means it's solid, because I don't want the player to be able to go through it. But because I can't have a solid collider that's also a trigger, I've gone and put another collider on down here. And the way I've done that is I've just gone add component, physics, sphere collider. And it's this collider that I've made my trigger. And it's this collider, as you can see, that I've moved round there like so. So let's think about what I want to do. The idea is that that page is not going to disappear. That page is maybe going to be nailed to the front door of a tavern or on the side of a building or whatever else. And in order for this to work, I'm going to put something on it called a page turner script. So I want it when the player gets into this sphere trigger here, that some text flashes up on the screen. But obviously when they step back out of it, I don't want the text to stay on the screen. I want the text to be kind of controlled by, you have to be standing right next to this thing here. So here's what I'm going to do in my page turner. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable that lets me tell the game engine whether I'm inside or outside something. And in order to do that, I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to call it inside, and I'm going to make that variable of type Boolean. So if the player is inside, then the Boolean would be true. The default position for all Booleans is that they start off false. If you want them to start off true, then you have to tell them that you want them to start off true. I don't. I want it to start off false, so I'll just leave it at that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my good old trusty function on trigger enter in order to turn that Boolean true. So what I'm saying is if the player enters the trigger, then inside equals true. So inside equals true. I don't need any of the if-then clauses because the basic operating function on trigger enter is that if you enter the trigger, whatever happens inside these clauses takes place. So I don't need an if because that's happening already. So the problem is Booleans work like switches. Once you've switched it on, it will stay on until you switch it off. So I need another way to switch it off. So I'm going to write another function here. And this function is on trigger exit. And quite simply, I'm going to say that when the player exits, inside becomes false again. Okay, so let's think about what we're going to do now. I'm going to need another GM script. I don't want to use the same GM script that I've used in that previous level because it's a different level. I've got different things happening. This isn't a collection game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another GM script, And just for the sake of differentiating it from the first one, I'm going to call this create JavaScript. I'm going to call this underscore GM Carn. So I know that this one is for the carnival. Open that up and then think about what we need. So if I'm going to want to display text on the screen, I'm probably going to want function OnGUI like I had in the previous one. So I'm going to use function OnGUI like that. And I'm just going to copy and paste my box because I can't really be bothered to type it out again if I don't need to. It's a different screen, so it doesn't matter. It can sit in the same place because that GM script is not going to be active at the same time as this one. This is going to be a GUI box. So it's going to be 10 in from the side, 10 down from the top. It's going to be 150 wide by 25 long. This time, all it's going to do, it's going to contain a message. It's going to say something like, beware the Omnithrop. Oh yes, we haven't forgotten about you, Mr. Omnithrop. And then close the brackets off and with the semicolon at the end to finish the statement. So the idea is that if I go into this here, if inside is true, it's going to display this message. So all I do is I go in here and I say if inside is exactly equal to true, it's got to have two equal signs, no semicolon because it's one long statement. So if inside is ever true, beware the Omnithrop flashes up on the screen. Let's take a quick look. Ooh, errors. Okay, so as you can see, I've got errors. I've also realized something else that's quite important. I'm going to fix the first thing first. I'm going to come back to this error. Unknown identifier inside. We had this problem before with the collection script. We also have another problem, which is that I haven't actually attached the script to the first-person controller, and that's a big no-no. So now I've attached the script to my first-person controller. I can go back and fix my error. Double-click it. It takes you straight to the error. The problem is exactly the same as it was in collection. So I'd created this thing called score, and I wanted another script to be able to access it. So the solution is the same as well. It's the page turner script that the variable exists in, so it's got to be a static variable so that other scripts can access it. And then over in the GM Carn script, I've got to tell it to go find it in page turner. So if page turner, capitals where there are capitals, dot inside, that's right, is true, then beware the Omnithrop flashes up on the screen. Save that, and go back into Unity to test it. Oh yes, the music. I'd forgotten about the music. Put this here, inside. Oh dear. I think I've accidentally toggled the trigger. Just had a quick error there. I bounced off the sphere because I didn't have trigger checked. Let's try one more time. Beware the Omnithrop. Okay, and you can see there the little box that it's in. Now, what if I wanted... Let's come out of this so the music isn't playing over me. What if I wanted more than just a little 3-word message? What if I wanted... instead of it saying that, I wanted it to say something like, beware, an evil old witch lives in this carnival, double exclamation mark, very scary. So the problem I'm going to have, if I try and play this, is that my box isn't going to be big enough to contain all this information. Go up to it here, and you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so in order to fix that, I'm going to add in another variable here. This is a variable that gets used quite a lot. So this variable, I'm simply going to call it style, and it's of type GUIStyle. So capital GUI and the S for GUIStyle. What this basically does is it lets me edit the text in the way that I might in Word. So I can change the font, I can change the size, I can change is it left aligned, right aligned, and most importantly, I can wrap the text so it doesn't shoot off the side of the box. So in order to get this to work, you've just got to make sure that after you've finished with your string statement or whatever else, outside that there, you put a comma and you just put style, which is the name of this variable here. If I save this, let's take a look. That's the style that I've added, and this is all the stuff I can do with it. So normal is where you want to do most of your work. You can also change the font down here. I'm going to give it a font, which probably explains why it's not showing up, because it hasn't got a font. I'm going to leave the font size as 0. Do I want it to overflow or be clipped? I want it to overflow. Do I want word wrap? Yes, I do. Word wrap and overflow should make sure that your text all appears in the box. So let's just quickly test this. Okay, here we go. To the object. Oh my stars. The text is appearing, it's just absolutely tiny. Can you see it in the top corner? Let's fix that by changing the font size to 10. Save. Beware, an evil old witch lives in this carnival. Okay, so you get the basic idea. Obviously the font is far too small, probably going to make it 25. And also you'll notice that the box it was in has disappeared. It hasn't disappeared, but it's just got no background. So I could put anything I want, any kind of texture in that background there. I'm going to put it on, no, I'm going to put it on sand. So if I drag the basic sand texture, not the material, but the texture into there, then I'll get a nice sandy background for every box that's got this particular style on it. But of course it's only going to be the dimensions of the box, and the dimensions of the box are whatever the script says they are. So you're going to have a fair amount of tweaking here, going back and forth in order to get everything to fit. I'm not going to do that now because you can do that in your own time. So the final thing to do is to go back into my collection, game here, find my sphere, and start populating the game. Going to duplicate that out, take it to there, going to duplicate that, take it to there, going to duplicate that. So that's now 4 I've got in my game, that's 5, that's 6, that's 7, that's 8, 9, and 10. Obviously, quite importantly, I'm going to want to go back into my GM script and say that if the score equals, in fact, you know, I'm going to create a variable. Variable win score, and that's going to be an integer. And I'm going to put if win score, if the score equals win score. So go back into Unity and just set the win score in Unity on my player to 10, and now I can do it manually in the game. Okay guys, so once you've got this the way you want it, obviously you can add all sorts of other obstacles into your scene. You can put some of these up high so the player has to find them. You can create other objects and you can kind of hide these behind them, or you can create whole platforms and steps that the player has to jump up in order to get onto them. I'm going to spend 5 minutes in a quick speed model here and show you some of the things that you can do. Okay, let's see what this looks like. Okay, and that's my basic game. In the next tutorial, I'm going to show you how to add obstacles and dangers in the form of restarting the level. I'm going to show you how to add health and damage to the player. And finally, I'm going to show you how to build your finished game and export it out so others can play it. Thank you for watching this Unity tutorial. I'm Dr. H of Octo Beard Media, and as always, do please hit subscribe. Thank you.